and welcome to another episode of the Ins and Outs of Work.
I'm Joe, aka the HR Outsider.
And I'm Nelly, the HR Insider. In today's episode, we talk about remote offboarding. What does it entail? A few great did you knows, our Outsider Outpouring from your resident HR Outsider, and of course, some myths to debunk.
So as in every episode that we've done, there's going to be a lot of information here. If you'd like to read up on any of the points that we make today, check the show notes wherever you're listening for all the links.
Before we get started, you know what to do. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share this episode with a friend, and leave a review.
Yes, happy listening.
Enjoy. Joe, here we are.
Yes.
The final part of our Fundamentals series.
That's it. I feel like we're like Frodo and his friend Sam, is it? Almost at Mount Doom at the end of the journey.
Oh dear.
Oh
dear.
But it's happier than that.
It is a lot happier than that, absolutely. And before we get there, let's get to this episode first. Starting by the definition. And this is where we talk about what are we actually talking about in the episode.
It's a good place to start.
Employee offboarding is the process during which an employee parts ways with the people and the organization they worked for. The purpose of an offboarding period is twofold. On the one hand, it's meant to help the organization grow wiser in hiring and employee experience and to keep the impact of the departure of the person to the business to a minimum. On the other hand, it is used to shape the critical last impressions employees will have of the company and the image they'll portray to the outside world.
Yes. So interestingly, in our onboarding episode, you brought in an example around the honeymoon, right? It's like the honeymoon.
Yeah.
Here, offboarding done well is like a divorce on good terms, where the ex-lovers remain close friends. It's a process that deserves almost as much attention as onboarding.
Absolutely. And talking about first and last impressions, the first impression is very important, but the last impression, Joe, that someone has also tends to stick.
It does, big time.
Yeah. All right. On to our did you knows. So in this part, we share some interesting did you knows about the topic. Here goes, Joe. Did you know that in a lot of cases, your employees could be current or future customers of the business, so leaving them on a good note is always a good idea. They could also be a great source of candidate referrals, so that's another reason to part ways in a pleasant way with a good, structured offboarding experience.
Very good point.
And also, did you know that the Aberdeen Group found that companies with a strong offboarding practice had 14% higher employee retention and 11% higher engagement, we talked about that last week, than those without a structured offboarding.
Wow, I did not know that, Neely. Thank you very much. Okay, did you know that, Neely, there are two other benefits which we'd like to share? You probably do know that we want to share them, but one of them is around data and one of them is data breaches. So did you know this? More than half of the employees surveyed by a Ponemon Institute study admitted to taking information from a former employer. Shock horror. And 40% admitted they intended to use it in a new job. Stolen data is a real security breach that has to be addressed by proper offboarding procedures and steps to prevent that kind of activity, Neely.
Absolutely.
It's massive. It's something you don't necessarily think about when you think about offboarding. First of all, but it's so important. According to IBM's Cost of Data Breach report in 2019, the average total cost of a data breach is, $3.92 million nearly. That's massive.
Yeah.
This seemingly minor action of improperly offboarding an employee can lead to major consequences for your business. So it's really something you need to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's a last one that is a bit on a more positive note, let's say. And this is a did you know about what's called the boomerang employee. Now, Joe, do you know what a boomerang employee is?
I know what a boomerang is. I know what an employee is. So I think I can piece the two together, but I'd love you to tell me as well.
I think you can too, Joe. But so yeah, boomerang employees are people who used to work at the company and then they're coming back, boomeranging in. Now, did you know though that 15% of employees boomerang back to a former employer.
That seems like a decent percentage.
It does. And that 40% of employees say that they would consider boomeranging back to a company where they had previously worked.
Okay, so it makes offboarding all the more important.
Absolutely. And then when we talk about onboarding, if they boomerang back, onboarding is going to be so much easier, isn't it?
Exactly right, because they've already worked for you.
Exactly.
Okay, it's time for the segment I know you all love. It's the Outsider Outpouring. 30 seconds from me as your HR outsider to give an outsider's perspective on this topic, remote offboarding. So let's start the clock. Here we go. The term offboarding for me has become pretty synonymous with the exit interview nearly. The exit interview, I've had a couple of those in my time. And to be honest, if I think about exit interviews, the ones I've had anyway, they feel a lot more like a tick the box exercise than a real search for real true feedback from the employee who's leaving. And to me, that seems like a bit of a missed opportunity because that leaving employee could provide some incredible candid feedback, not only on why they're leaving, but on their job and the organization as a whole. So what's the point of doing exit interviews if you're not open to real feedback and learning in your organization? That's my rant. That's my outpouring for today, Neely.
Thanks so much for that, Joe. We are on to our myths. In this part, we share a few myths and then we debunk them for you. Here's the first one. Offboarding is saying goodbye to an employee forever. This is not true. Absolutely not true.
Categorically untrue.
Absolutely. Offboarding should not be tinged with regret and anger. Offboarding should focus on easing the transition and making it mutually beneficial. Now, former employees can of course be added to an alumni group if you have one, and they should in any case be given a proper farewell. And if an amicable relationship exists, then even after the employee has left, they might refer people, as we mentioned earlier, and those people can be really great candidates for your organization.
Yes, I think the alumni group piece is such a good one.
Yeah.
Really. Not enough companies do that well.
Not yet, no. And an exit interview, here's the second myth. An exit interview is all that's needed in offboarding. That's what you mentioned in your rant, Joe, that for you it's become a bit synonymous, offboarding to exit interview. This is not true. At least it's not how it should be. There are proper steps to take here when it comes to offboarding someone. There's the whole practical side of things, meaning making sure that you revoke all the system accesses, that you get back all the things like access cards, company cars, uniforms, if you do have them in your organization. There's all that, but there's also thanking people for the energy that they and the time that they spend in your organization. So there's that part as well. There are a lot of things to take into account in a well-structured offboarding process, and it is definitely not just limited to the exit interview.
Exactly. And it's actually about having a plan after the exit interview to actually do something with the feedback, right?
Absolutely, Joe.
So crucial.
Because that can give you a wealth of information on how to improve things within the organization. So it doesn't stop with the exit interview. There's a lot to do afterwards.
Yes.
Okay, let's get straight to it then, Joe. Here's some insider action for you. And we have 9 steps here of the employee offboarding process.
9 steps. So buckle your seatbelts.
Absolutely. First one, thank the leaving employee. Yes, this is a very obvious one, but something that too often still gets forgotten. So thank the leaving employee for the time and the energy that they've invested in your company. And if they move on to a new role, congratulate them. Number 2, communicate about the departure. We understand that it can be tempting to hold off on communicating about an employee who's leaving, but it is wiser to share this information straight away to avoid office gossip.
Let's be transparent.
Yeah, absolutely. So be honest, as with most things, that's usually the best way to go about something. Tell people that someone is leaving and why, and that you will fill them in on all the details as soon as you have them. Number 3, a very important one here, Joe. Make sure that you think of a knowledge transfer because you do not want your employee to leave with all their knowledge and then to be left with a gap.
Yes.
So what does that mean? Ask people, of course, to create a handover document or video with useful tips for whoever is going to take over their role.
I know I've always loved getting a handover document at the start of a new role.
If it's a good one.
a good one, of course.
Absolutely. But so make sure that you do that. And here's an added bonus actually of, giving people a really structured offboarding process and a fantastic last impression is that you'll remain on good terms with them. So if you do find that some knowledge is missing, it will be easy to reach out to them and ask them for it. Number 4, Joe, we touched on this earlier, but recover company assets. Now, super important here. Don't forget to ask back for all the things that are company equipment. Badges, credit cards, uniforms if you're wearing them, phones, laptops, a company car, you name it. Ask all that stuff back.
Yes, don't forget that step.
Number 5, revoke systems access. Now, Joe, you talked about the data breaches. I thought this was literally mind-blowing how much money this is costing companies and the risks that this is creating for your organization. Companies forget a lot of the time to revoke leaving employees system accesses. Yeah, this is bad.
Very bad.
Yeah. So do not forget to revoke all of them. So think of CRM systems, company social media accounts, content databases, and access to sales dashboards. But there's so many other things. It really depends on the role and the company.
Make a long list and just go through the list.
Yeah, and keep it structured. All right, number 6, hold an exit interview. Now, we talked about the exit interview, but when done properly, it can give you so much information, Joe. It can give you insights into your organization's strengths and weaknesses and on how to improve the latter. Now, in terms of exit interview questions, that would justify an entire episode in its own. So here are just a few examples, but again, there are many, many more. So what you could ask people is, if we could improve in any way, how could we do that? What are we not doing that we should be doing as a company? And is there anything that we could have done to make you stay? Then, number 7, update your organizational chart. Very practical one here, but one that can prevent a lot of internal confusion. Once an employee has left the company, make sure to update your organizational chart and directories. 8, don't forget about the payroll. This, Joe, I could hardly believe. But just as companies forget to revoke system access, they also sometimes forget to take people off the payroll.
Wow. Has that happened to you?
No, it hasn't.
No,
I wish a bit that it had. Yeah. But so even though payroll systems do have this functionality built in, you really want to make sure that the final payment process is actually being carried out, and you want to make sure that it stops then. And the last one, think of this as staying in touch with an old friend. From time to time, you ask them how they are doing and what they're up to. Perhaps you meet up for a in-person or virtual coffee. But when it comes to former employees, there are various ways to stay in touch with them. One is to create a talent pool or an alumni group. Now, both options really allow you to send former employees the latest company news and vacancies in case they want to boomerang back, and they stay up to date if they want to.
Fantastic. Thank you for those 9 steps, Neely. We've got such a great picture now of how to do offboarding. Fantastic. We are going to move on to our final segment on this topic. It's the story example, where we find an amazing innovative company doing remote offboarding in an amazing way. So, Neely, today, we've actually already talked about this company, but this example is just way too good not to talk about. It's Airbnb again. So Airbnb, especially with their CEO and co-founder, Brian Chesky, provided an incredible example of what good offboarding looks like when they communicated to the whole company about redundancies back in May 2020 around COVID-19 in the wake of that. Actually, his email to the whole company is available on their website now. You can go and read it in the show notes. And it's just really brilliant example, Neely. So one of the major things this involved was support for alumni and support for people leaving to find new jobs. And we just thought that was such a great example that we need to share it with you. So what did that look like? First of all, they put together what's called an alumni talent directory. So they launched a public-facing website to help teammates who were leaving find new jobs, Neely. So departing employees could opt in to have profiles, resumes, and work samples accessible to potential employers. And those employers knew that these people obviously had worked at Airbnb, were incredibly talented. So just an amazing example there. Secondly, what they did is they actually put a lot of their recruiting team who was staying with Airbnb onto what's called an alumni placement team. So those recruiters that were staying with Airbnb provided support to departing employees to help them find their next job. That commitment to do that is amazing.
Yeah.
And finally, they sort of paid for a service called Rise Smart as well. So they offered 4 months of career services through Rise Smart, a company that specializes in career transition and job placement services. So all in all, this is just an amazing example of like not putting a full stop on that relationship, but really seeing people through, even if they have to leave your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And this really shows as well that they truly care about their employees.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome story.
One other example that we just wanted to quickly share from you, it's from another company, but it really fits within this remote offboarding world that we sort of still find ourselves in some ways. It's a company called Padlet, and essentially they have a tool which allows you to put together what's called a wall of appreciation. So really the need here is that in remote offboarding, it can be a little clinical where you're not with people. You don't have the opportunity to celebrate or to go to a restaurant or whatever that might look like. But this tool is amazing because essentially, you can set up a virtual wall of appreciation for each leaver where colleagues can actually leave positive feedback, share memories, and express their appreciation. And the leaver can go away with that for years to come.
Yeah, speaking of last impressions, that I think is a really, really nice last impression to get from your colleagues, Joe.
It so is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then speaking of last impressions once again, because this is it for us and for our fundamentals series.
Yes, it's been a fantastic series. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. It's been brilliant. We're not going away forever though, Neely, are we?
No, we're not.
No, we're not. We're going to be back with an outro to this season 2 very soon, an outro that will explain what's happening next in the weeks to come. We're not going to be gone for very long, so do watch out for that.
Absolutely. And enjoy your summer.
Yes, enjoy the rest of your summer.
Bye.
Bye.